Okay, so for number 3, I already kind of got it started for us. It says reflect triangle PQR over the y-axis. Well, our y-axis is our line of reflection, so I highlighted that, and then I reflected triangle PQR over that line of reflection. So then it wants us to say what happened to each of the coordinates. Well, the y values here, okay, stayed the same. So y values stayed the same. And the x values, if we look at those, became opposite. So that makes sense, right? Because we just talked about if we reflect over the y-axis, we take the opposite of the x values. Okay? So that's what happened here. Okay? So then it says reflect your new triangle PQR over the x-axis, So this time we're going to reflect over the x-axis with the new triangle. So now we're talking about this triangle here. Okay? Then describe what happened. So I'm going to do that really quickly, and then I will... Okay, so this time I reflected my image, so the image Q prime, P prime, R prime, over the x-axis. Okay, and as you can see, I had to label it with 2 apostrophes. We would call this Q double prime, P double prime, and R double prime. If we do 2 reflections on one coordinate plane, okay? So let's talk about what happened to my coordinates going from my image to my next image, okay? So my y values, they became opposite this time. And the x values stayed the same this time. This makes sense, right? With our last 2 examples, when we did a reflection over the x-axis, we took the opposite of the y values. Okay? So, number 5, Bella thinks that the transformation below represents a translation. Is she correct? Why or why not? Well, so we need to look at 2 things here. Right away, I look and I see that the picture itself, if it wasn't labeled, I would think definitely it looks the same to me. It's the same size, same shape, same orientation. So I would say yes if it didn't have labels. But if we look at where the letters are located, are they in the same position? No. So is the orientation the same? It is not. So we want to say, no, this can't be a translation because the orientation changed. Okay, so this actually is a reflection. Even though it's not here, there would be a line of reflection here. Okay, and my points would be the exact same distance from that line of reflection. Okay. All right. So, number 6, use the chart to compare and contrast translations and reflections. How are translations similar? Well, they both create an image that is congruent to the pre-image, right? They both create congruent figures. And I totally just wrote the pi sign instead of the congruent sign. Okay. But how are they different? Well, a translation preserves orientation. But does that happen in a reflection? No, it does not. Okay, so the biggest difference between a translation and a reflection is that when you translate a figure, it keeps the same orientation. When you reflect a figure, it does not keep the same orientation. The orientation changes, okay? Okay, so now we need to use what we have learned, okay, in order to determine where our new points would be after reflecting over the x-axis and then after reflecting over the y-axis. So first and foremost, I'm going to write my rules, okay? So when we reflect over the x-axis, algebraically, what are we doing? We are taking the opposite of y. So remember that negative sign means opposite. When we reflect over the y-axis, we take the opposite of x, okay? So now that I wrote those up there, this will help me a lot, okay? So reflecting over the x-axis, I need to take the opposite of my y values. So my y value here is 8. So I keep my x the same, which would be 6, and then I take the opposite of 8, which is negative 8. Okay? Then, if I'm reflecting over the y-axis now, I need to take the opposite of x. Okay, that's what my rule says. So if I take the opposite of x, my a prime would be negative 6, and I'm starting from my original here, positive 8. Okay? Alright, on a separate sheet of paper, I want you guys to try B through E on your own. Then I will come back. So hopefully you guys pause the video because I am about to show the answer. So if you have not paused, please pause the video and on a separate sheet of paper, write your answers. Okay, so here are the answers. Go ahead and check yours. If you need to pause the video, go ahead and do that. But I'm going to move on. So let's look at number 8. Summarize what happens to the coordinates in a figure when the following occur. Reflection over the x-axis. Well, we take the opposite of y values. Keep x the same. Okay? If we reflect over the y-axis, we take the opposite of x values and keep y the same. Alright, so that is today's lesson. Next, you can work on homework 3 that's your classwork. It's a graded assignment. So yeah.